Over the course of the next 7 to 8 minutes, I'm going to share with you some of the key features of the Grade 2 Math Expression Scope and Sequence for the 2019-20 school year. As you can tell from this first page, it's very similar to the past years, but as you start to flip through, you'll see that there is some restructuring and some kind of additional information that is being provided that I hope will be helpful. The first thing you probably have noticed is that only Cycle 1 is available so far. Because of these changes and the addition of information, we just didn't have time to put out more than Cycle 1 at this moment. Cycle 2 will be available by October 24th, and then Cycles 3 and 4 will follow. But never fear, this first page outlines for you which topics or units and which lessons align to each cycle. So even though you don't have that more detailed view of the year, you can see the way math expressions is being laid out and time is being allotted throughout the cycles. So although this isn't new, just to remind you, this first page shows you the dates, teaching days, and units for each cycle. And although in K-2 you don't have benchmarks, just to create alignment within the school, we still do follow the benchmark cycles as kind of our metric for how we break apart the time in math. So because the first benchmark starts on November 12th, the benchmark cycle goes from September 3rd up until that previous Friday. So this is the time allotted for this content. Then right away on November 13th, it's expected that if you want to remain on pace, you would move on. Although you don't have a benchmark in Grade 2, over the past couple of years, we have provided optional common assessments. Not everyone seems to be aware of those, so if you're not, FYI, they are available. They typically have about 3 open-ended questions that align to the content that you taught in that cycle. They're available at the same time as the benchmarks. This next page looks a little bit different than in the past. I believe in the past it had 3 columns. I'm not sure, but regardless, it does look a little bit different. It still has the same function, which is to show you exactly what is being taught in the first cycle. And in addition to just telling you what's taught, it helps you to see the alignment between the Common Core on the right and the PA Core on the left. So whether your school likes to rely on the PA Core or likes to use the Common Core, you can see how those two things are aligned. The PA Core is this kind of big, broader standard that aligns with, in the Common Core, what they tend to call a cluster. So the 2 NBTA cluster of understand place value is roughly aligned with this PA Core standard. In the Common Core, they break that down into sub-standards. So this A cluster has a standard A1. I believe it also has an A2 standard, but that one is not taught in Cycle 1, so only the standards that are taught in Cycle 1 are listed here. You come down to another PA standard with its aligned Common Core cluster, and under that Common Core cluster, the Common Core standards. These all kind of feature the same content, but in more or less detail. A new feature is this bold language, conceptual, procedural, and this cycle, application. So those words hopefully sound familiar. Those are the 3 aspects of rigor: conceptual, procedural, and application. And we talked a lot over the last year about how we want to achieve a balance. You think of it like that 3-legged stool, where you have all 3 aspects represented in students' math education. But it's not true that you necessarily have every aspect every day. And as these pages will show you, some standards are more aligned to a certain aspect. So by making you aware of which aspect is most related, that can hopefully help you make decisions. So gosh, if I'm teaching NBT A1 or its accompanying PA Core standard up here, 212B1, I realize that's conceptual. I want my questions to focus on ideas and understandings, not on memorization and drill and skill. That said, when I come down here, if I'm doing this 2NBTB5, that is procedural. That is more about fluency and memorization. Or down here, if I'm doing 208 A1, it's about word problems. It's about making sure students understand what's happening in the situation. So I wouldn't be asking them questions about, well, how specifically do you add 8 plus 5? It would be, how did you know in this word problem that you were supposed to add? Why does addition make sense here? So those aspects of rigor are hopefully going to be helpful for you. Whew. All right, now the scope and sequence day by day layout. So it should look similar to the past, except a whole lot more words. Unit 1, addition and subtraction within 20. Math expressions is broken into big ideas. So each big idea will be highlighted in this darker gray language. And that big idea, strategies for addition and subtraction, comes straight from the book. But then I sort of provide maybe 1 to 2 sentences that give you a deeper summary of that big idea. Hopefully that information is helpful to really give you a tip of, hey, in this big idea, this is what's happening. This is what I'm focusing on. It's helpful to really think about those big ideas. There are 9 lessons in the first big idea. When I plan, I like to do it by the big idea. Okay, what's happening in this big idea? What do I need to accomplish? How much time do I have to do it? So the unit is a really large amount of information. The big idea focuses it. One thing that's new this year is that instead of just giving you the overall objective for the entire lesson, I broke it down by activity. So activity 1, that first line there, relate addition and subtraction using math, mountains, and equations, that would be your SWABOT. Students will be able to relate addition and subtraction, blah, 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 blah. A lot of times I use the exact language of math expressions, but sometimes I did tweak it because I didn't necessarily feel like their activity purpose was as specific as it could be. So if you're looking for objectives for activities, they're right there. Then in italics, I provide you with some details. Reading these italics do not summarize the activity. You have to look at the activity itself for the summary. These italics probably don't make any sense unless you look at the activity. So they're not intended to totally summarize it and prevent you from having to look at the book. But if you use these notes and look at the book, the intention is that it should give you some tips and strategies and tricks to help make the activity more meaningful. The other thing that's new this year is that I narrowed down the standards. Math expressions tends to say that every lesson teaches like 5 standards. And while it's true that they definitely do touch on all of those standards, I think it makes it really hard to focus on what you're teaching when you have so many standards aligned to it. So I did my best to narrow it down. What are the 1, ideally, or 2 standards that are most aligned to that lesson? My hope here is that by breaking it down by activity and narrowing down the standards, this will facilitate your process of planning. You'll be able to better see which activities you should do, how you should spend your time, what standards you should focus on. And so yeah, hopefully this is more user-friendly than in the past. I am definitely open to feedback because this takes a lot of time. And if it's not helpful, I would love to know what would be more helpful. All right. Skim down, 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 and you can see that was the entire first cycle. You'll notice that there's a couple times when I didn't include notes. That may have partly been due to time or just due to me not really having anything to add. I tried to only add what I thought was helpful. But again, keep in mind, the biggest important part is that this first line in each activity is the objective. So I didn't write SWABOT, but the intention is you could proceed that language with SWABOT. All right, I took too long. I gave myself 7 to 8 minutes and I took almost 10. I hope this is helpful. It looks like a lot more words this year, but the intention is for it to be helpful, to narrow down the standards, and to focus on the activities. So good luck. Reach out to math@PhilaSD if you have any suggestions or feedback or questions. Have a wonderful first cycle.